Horror Story Nightwalkers. I used to work at a small hotel on the edge of town. The hotel was quite peaceful, nestled between dense woods and a long, deserted road. After a hurricane swept through the town, business slowed down significantly. I worked the night shift from 6 o'clock p.m. to 2 o'clock a.m., often without seeing anyone for hours. The only sound in the empty lobby was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. One night, I was sitting in the break room, sipping warm coffee and watching the security monitors when I heard a deep voice call out from the lobby. I got up and went to the front desk. There was a man standing on the other side of the glass partition. He was tall, with wild hair and a strange, jittery energy about him. He asked for some towels, so I handed them to him through the opening under the glass. He grabbed them with such force that it made me flinch, and then he left without saying another word. Curious, I watched him on the security monitor as he walked down the hallway, rubbing the towels against his face and neck. It was bizarre, but I shrugged it off and returned to the break room. About 10 minutes later, I heard his voice again. This time, he was back at the front desk, banging on the glass. "My key card isn't working," he shouted. I asked for his room number, but he responded strangely, saying something like 2C Pwy, which didn't match our room numbering system. When I told him that, his demeanor changed. He leaned close to the glass, his eyes wide and wild. "I'm going to kill you," he said with a cold smile. I froze as he repeated it, louder each time, until he was nearly screaming. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911, shouting at him that the police were on their way. He stared at me with that twisted smile, mocking me as I spoke to the dispatcher. Finally, he left the hotel, disappearing into the night. I was shaken but relieved that he was gone. I decided to stay in the lobby for the rest of my shift. When my relief arrived at 2 o'clock a.m., I hurried outside, eager to get home. The cold night air bit at my skin as I walked through the empty parking lot. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me, like someone walking on tiptoes. I turned around, and there he was, hiding behind a car.
Oh my God!
His eyes followed me from the shadows, and he whispered, "I'm going to kill you." Panic surged through me. I looked around, trying to decide what to do. My only chance was to run to the nearest house with a light on. I sprinted to the door and pounded on it, screaming for help. Just as he grabbed me from behind, the door flew open and the homeowner shouted, scaring him off. I collapsed in relief as the homeowner called the police. The police arrived, but he had already disappeared. I identified him on the security footage, but they never caught him. To this day, I still wonder if he's out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another chance. We met a crazy clown in the woods. In the summer of 2016, amid bizarre clown sightings across the USA, I stayed at our friend Milo's house, which bordered a dense forest. After a day of movies and snacks, we felt restless and decided to take a late-night walk. Armed with flashlights, we ventured into the forest at 2 a.m., our conversation mingling with the sounds of the night. By 2:45 a.m., we reached a clearing with an old, creaky playground, until Milo pointed towards the old restroom building. There, partially illuminated by our flashlights, stood a man in a tattered blood red clown suit. Unlike the playful clowns from childhood, this one was menacing. His face was pale, with smudged makeup and a wide, eerie grin. His hair was a tangled mess of red and black. Paralyzed with fear, we watched as the clown stared at us, his head tilted to one side. Then, he started walking towards us, slow but deliberate. Panic surged through us, and we instinctively backed away, trying to decide whether to flee or confront the figure. Suddenly, the clown broke into a sprint.
Help me!
That was all the motivation we needed. We turned and ran as fast as we could back towards Milo's house, the forest path a blur beneath our feet. After what felt like an eternity, we burst out of the forest and onto the road in front of Milo's house. We glanced back and saw the clown standing at the forest's edge, partially illuminated by the streetlight. He had stopped running but was still watching us, his sinister grin visible even from a distance. In his hand, he held a big rusty axe. We didn't wait to see what he would do next. We bolted into Milo's house, slamming the door shut behind us. Milo's parents were out of town, so it was just the two of us, alone and terrified. We gathered in the living room, each of us trying to catch our breath and process what had just happened. Milo turned on the front door camera, and we watched the screen in tense silence. The clown appeared at the edge of the frame, walking slowly down the street towards the house. He stopped in front of the gate, looking around as if searching for something. My heart sank as he approached the front door, his gaze fixed on the camera. He leaned in close, his face filling the screen, and made a series of grotesque, mocking gestures. He waved the knife slowly before stepping back and disappearing down the street. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, too scared to sleep. The image of the clown's twisted grin and the knife haunted our thoughts. We didn't tell anyone about the encounter, fearing disbelief or ridicule. To this day, the memory of that night lingers, a chilling reminder of how a seemingly innocent adventure can turn into a nightmare. We often wonder what might have happened if we hadn't run back to Milo's house, and the unsettling question of who, or what, the clown continues to haunt us. Horror story, The Strange Man with Red Eyes. This happened 6 years ago when I was working the night shift as a security guard in an old office building. Since then, I have never worked the night shift again. That night, the pale moonlight cast an eerie glow over the deserted scene, creating a chilling atmosphere. Around 3 a.m., I was doing my final patrol before ending my shift. As I walked through the dark hallway, I heard strange footsteps. I looked around, but saw no one. The footsteps continued, seeming to come closer to me. I started feeling uneasy, trying to stay calm and continue my work. But just as I reached the security room, the door suddenly opened. A man with disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes walked in. He was wearing a long black coat and carrying an old suitcase. There was no one around, and I couldn't understand how he got into the building at this hour. I swallowed nervously, trying to speak to him.
"Do you need any help?"
I asked, my voice trembling. The man didn't answer right away. He just stared at me for a long moment. Then he opened his mouth, his voice raspy like the wind through a crack in the door. "I need to go to a very special place, a place you will never forget." I didn't understand his meaning, but I responded anyway.
"I can't leave the building during my shift. Can you specify the location?"
The man smiled in a strange way, his thin lips curling up. "All right, take me to the basement. I was surprised, but didn't want to cause trouble, so I nodded and led him there. We stepped into the elevator, the air inside becoming oppressive. When the elevator doors opened at the basement level, a cold draft swept in. The man stepped out first, and I followed, feeling more anxious. He stopped in front of a small room, its door long locked. I didn't remember ever seeing this room before. The man pulled out an old key from his coat pocket, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. I stood outside, not daring to follow. "I've reached my destination," he said from inside. "Thank you for guiding me." I turned to leave, but suddenly, he appeared right in front of me, as quick as lightning. He placed his hand on my shoulder, gripping so tightly that it hurt. "Remember, you have helped me, and I will remember you." I screamed, trying to break free, but I couldn't. A sharp pain shot through my chest, and I collapsed. My eyes gradually closed. I gradually saw the door of the room closing before my eyes, accompanied by his satisfied, creepy laughter. And then I fainted. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a hospital bed. The doctor said I had a heart attack, but was lucky to survive. I recalled the man and asked everyone around about him, but no one had seen him, and the security cameras recorded no one but me. From the video extracted from the camera, it seems that I was talking to myself in front of the hallway door and then collapsed on the floor. It seems that I was taken to the hospital by the neighbors. I was haunted by his final look and his mysterious words. I could never forget that raspy voice. And every time I remember, I feel a chill down my spine. I had once guided a mysterious man, and it had changed my life forever. The creepy secret of the cheap motel. On our anniversary, we had a memorable time in every sense at an old suburban area. The bus ride took forever, and before we knew it, the sun was setting. Since we traveled by bus, it took more time, and soon it was evening. I didn't realize it was festival season there, so it was quite expensive and crowded. We found a very cheap place to stay, although it was a bit hard to find. I think the problem was that we entered any nearby place without considering the location. We prepared a simple dinner, shared stories, and then picked a movie to watch together. Suddenly, Min told me she started feeling a bit tired and dizzy, probably exhausted from the whole day. We decided to go to bed early to be ready for our plans the next day. I quickly fell asleep. However, Min found herself tossing and turning, unable to find a comfortable position and mumbling something softly. When she finally started to drift off, she told me she felt a strange sensation taking over her. Suddenly, my eyes opened for no reason. I usually sleep deeply and rarely wake up in the middle of the night unless someone shakes me awake. But my girlfriend, who was sleeping next to me, turned over, and I woke up due to her movement. Around midnight, Min started tossing and turning in her sleep. Her face was contorted with discomfort, and she began sweating profusely. Her skin was pale and clammy, and her breathing became strange and irregular. I opened my eyes slightly and saw my girlfriend get up and walk to the bathroom. Her movements were stiff, almost puppet-like, as if an invisible force was guiding her. At that moment, I saw a dark shadow following her. It wasn't her shadow because it had no hair on its head. Instead, it was a black figure with hands and feet moving independently, not matching her movements. It had no eyes, nose, or mouth, but it resembled a human figure. I don't believe in ghosts or supernatural phenomena without scientific evidence, but I definitely thought something was wrong. When I fully woke up, I jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom where my girlfriend had gone. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Then, I heard the laughter of a middle-aged man from inside. I remember it clearly because I wasn't drunk and was definitely alert. Slowly turning the locked doorknob, I shouted my girlfriend's name. "Open the door." I stood outside the bathroom, anxiety engulfing me. But there was no sound from inside, and the door remained closed. I still can't recall if the next part was a dream or reality. The laughter grew louder and more terrifying. I hesitated, but finally mustered the courage to open the door, only to find the bathroom empty. I thought long and hard about what had happened and went back to bed to try and collect myself. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and I felt a chilling sensation run down my spine. I nearly fainted when I saw it. My girlfriend was standing on the bed, staring at me with wide eyes as if possessed by something, then gave me a terrifying smile. I had been dating her for nearly 2 years, but had never seen such a horrifying smile before. Her eyes, once warm and loving, now held a chilling emptiness. She laughed again, the sound echoing through the room, sending shivers down my spine. I grabbed her shoulders and shook her hard, but she just fell back into sleep. I couldn't sleep that night and waited until morning with my eyes wide open. Min woke up and advanced towards me, her laughter becoming louder and more hysterical. I recoiled, my mind scrambling to make sense of the situation. The previously cozy bedroom had transformed into a nightmarish enclosure. I tried to reach Min, hoping to pull her out of whatever trance she was in. She went silent, her body collapsing to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. I immediately took her to the hospital because she had fainted, feeling less afraid in the daylight despite not believing much in the supernatural. I began to clean up and quickly got out of the rental. As we left the rental, I asked her if she remembered anything from the previous night, but she seemed unaware of what had happened. I didn't tell her anything because I thought she would be scared if I detailed the events. But now, after 10 years, I suddenly recalled the incident and started researching the rental. It turns out that there had been several murders and suicides there over the past few decades. The media didn't directly mention the name of the place, but I'm certain it's the right one after. Reading some reviews about the accommodation. The crazy mother on campus. Exam season had arrived, and normally our school library would close, but because of the exams, the school decided to keep it open until midnight. My house is not far from the school, so instead of studying at home, I prefer to study in the quiet and peaceful library. That day, I left home at 6 o'clock, engrossed in my studies, and didn't realize that it was already 10 p.m. I had never stayed this late before. The ticking clock was loud, each second echoing in the emptiness, signaling that it was nearly midnight. Strangely, there were hardly any students studying at that hour. It was absolute silence. I finished my work and headed home. The library is at the end of the hallway, so as usual, I walked down the long, dark corridor of the school. But today, I felt an unusual chill in the air. It was empty and the silence was suffocating. I walked through the hallway and quickly approached the exit. I walked fast, the sound of my footsteps echoing ominously. The once familiar campus now felt strange and frightening. The trees swayed gently in the wind, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out. The path narrowed as I entered the school garden, the lights becoming fewer. A sudden loud snap of a branch made me stop dead in my tracks. I spun around, heart racing, but saw only shadows. Exhausted and hungry, I could barely walk properly. I kept my eyes on the ground as I walked. From the darkness, a figure emerged. It was a woman walking with a strange, crippled gait. Her legs seemed twisted, making it difficult for her to walk. She moved like a zombie. Now I was close enough to see her clearly. Her clothes were torn and filthy, her hair hanging in tangled clumps around her ghostly pale face. My heart pounded in my chest as the woman limped toward me, her eyes staring as if she wanted to pounce on me. I backed away, fear enveloping me. The uneven footsteps of the woman grew louder, echoing in the empty night. She pursued me relentlessly. I ran aimlessly until I reached the school parking lot, desperately searching for a place to hide. The parking lot was eerily empty. I hid behind a car, my breath coming in ragged gasps from the exhausting chase. But she did not tire. She searched for me with a crazed determination. From my hiding spot, I saw the woman moving past the cars, her head turning from side to side, searching. I felt truly terrified and breathless. The woman stopped near my hiding place. I held my breath, afraid to make a sound, and prayed she wouldn't see me. Thankfully, she just stood there, scouting the area, and then turned and continued moving. Seizing the opportunity, I bolted from my hiding spot, running towards the dormitory. The lights of the building were a beacon of hope, but the woman's footsteps grew louder behind me. I didn't care about anything else. I just ran, fearing for my life. I reached the dormitory entrance, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keypad. I could hear the woman's labored breathing right behind me. Finally, the door clicked open, and I rushed inside, slamming it shut behind me. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath. I looked through the glass, but the woman was nowhere to be seen. The campus was dark and silent. I collapsed onto my bed, my mind racing with the terror of what had just happened. The image of the woman's pale, haunting face was etched into my memory. The next morning, I was determined to find out more about what I had experienced. I asked the groundskeeper who tended to the school's garden. He looked quite old, so I thought he might know something. I asked him, and he said that in 1998, there was a 32-year-old woman who had a 20-year-old daughter who also attended this school. One day, while playing with her friends, the daughter mysteriously had an accident on the school grounds and died. The mother couldn't bear the thought that her daughter might have been bullied or something terrible had happened to her that she didn't know about. Losing her daughter drove her mad, and she would appear and disappear erratically. I decided I would never walk alone on the school grounds again. For the sake of my safety, the danger was too real and could strike at any moment.
The curse of the top students. The school stood tall and intimidating with its Gothic architecture, old and worn, with ivy creeping up the walls. The atmosphere always felt gloomy. The walls were adorned with old portraits of past headmasters and notable students, their eyes seemingly following anyone who passed by. The floor creaked with every step. Elena, a studious girl in her late teens, was seated at a desk near the back of the classroom, immersed in a book. The room was empty except for her, and the silence was suffocating. The school had a bookshelf dedicated to the history and legends of the school over the years. It was quite large and sparked her curiosity to learn more. Elena searched through the archives, looking for information about a mysterious curse she had heard rumors about. While reading an old history book about the school's founding, she came across a leather-bound book. aged and ancient. Unexpectedly, a page with a paper bookmark revealed a section about the curse of the good and top students at the school. Years ago, the school had been plagued by a series of unexplained events. The top students began disappearing under mysterious circumstances, their academic excellence seemingly attracting a dark force. Shadows moved on their own, and strange whispers filled the hallways. Elena read about how the curse started with a student who made a pact with an unknown entity to achieve academic success. The price was their soul, and the curse had haunted the school ever since. Elena left school to go home. She started to feel scared because she was one of the top students at the school. She hadn't witnessed anything herself, so everything seemed vague to her, caught between reality and fiction. As she descended the stairs, the eyes of the portrait seemed to follow her, glowing faintly and eerily in the light. Elena entered the bathroom to splash water on her face, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. She looked up into the mirror and saw a shadowy figure standing behind her. She spun around, but the bathroom was empty. Her breathing became rapid, and she quickly left. Elena sought refuge in the science lab, hoping to find a logical explanation for the strange events. As she flipped through a textbook, the lights flickered and went out. She heard a low growl and saw beakers and test tubes rattling on their own. A cold breeze brushed past her, sending shivers down her spine. Panic. Elena ran down the hallway, her footsteps echoing loudly. She heard whispers of her name, growing louder and more urgent. She stumbled and fell, the whispers now a cacophony of sinister voices. Beware, your turn will come. Desperate, Elena burst into the headmaster's office, hoping to find answers. The office was dark and cluttered with old papers and books. The headmaster's chair slowly turned to reveal a shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. Elena screamed and backed away, tripping over a stack of books. Elena fled the building, her heart pounding. She looked back at the school, which now seemed even more menacing under the moonlight. As Elena ran across the school grounds, she felt a presence chasing her. She reached the gates and looked back one last time. There was a dark shadow peering out from the window. Safe back in her room, Elena tried to calm herself, but the events of the night kept replaying in her mind. She opened her laptop and began writing about the curse, determined to warn others. As she typed, she felt a strange sensation. A shadowy figure lunged towards Elena. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure grabbed her arm, and she was suddenly overwhelmed by a flood of terrifying visions, students being dragged into darkness, their faces twisted in silent screams, and the entity that started the curse grinning maliciously. Elena saw the student who made the pact, standing before a dark figure with glowing eyes, signing a blood-soaked contract. Elena snapped back to reality, the shadowy figure gone. She was left shivering, a dark mark on her arm where the figure had grabbed her. The screen faded to black, and the only sound was a whisper. Good luck. If you don't leave, you will be next. She didn't know if the curse would follow her, but with such a warning, she decided not to stay another minute. The next day, she left and transferred to a different school. Not long after, the school was abandoned due to rumors, and students gradually left.
The Haunting of Jefferson High. Jefferson High School was an old building with a rich history. It had been around for over a century, with stories of hauntings passed down from generation to generation. As a senior, I never believed the tales until the night I decided to stay late to finish a project. It was a stormy evening, the perfect setting for a horror story. The rain pounded against the windows, and thunder rumbled in the distance. The school was eerily silent, with only the occasional creak of the old wooden floors breaking the stillness. My friend Emily had promised to stay with me, but she bailed at the last minute, leaving me alone in the dimly lit library. I was deep into my research when I heard it, a faint whisper. I looked up, scanning the rows of bookshelves, but saw nothing. Shaking it off as my imagination, I continued working. The whisper came again, louder this time, and I could make out words.
Help me.
My heart raced as I stood up, the sound seemingly coming from the far corner of the library. Clutching my phone for light, I walked towards the sound. As I neared the corner, the air grew colder, and the whispering grew more desperate. I turned the corner and saw an old, dusty book lying on the floor. The whispering stopped. Oh. Hesitantly, I picked up the book and opened it. Inside, there were handwritten notes dating back decades, detailing the mysterious disappearance of a student named Sarah Mitchell in 1953. According to the notes, Sarah had stayed late one night to finish a project, just like me. She was last seen in the library, and rumors had it that her spirit never left. Chills ran down my spine as I read about strange occurrences reported by students over the years, books flying off shelves, cold spots, and whispers for help. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the temperature dropped even further. I turned around to leave. The library door slammed shut on its own. Panic set in as I rushed to the door, pulling with all my might, but it wouldn't budge. My phone's light flickered, and in the dim glow, I saw her, a translucent figure of a girl standing by the window, her eyes filled with sorrow.
Help me.
She whispered again, her voice echoing in the empty room. I froze, unable to move or speak. Sarah's ghost floated closer, her hand reaching out to me. In a flash, images flooded my mind. Her being locked in the library, crying for help, and eventually succumbing to despair. Summoning all my courage, I asked, "How can I help you?" Grabbing a pen, I wrote down her final words as she dictated them to me. She spoke of feeling trapped, alone, and scared, and how she longed for someone to find her. As I finished writing, the room grew warmer, and the oppressive feeling lifted. Sarah's ghost smiled faintly before fading away, leaving me alone in the now silent library. The door creaked open, and I knew she was finally at peace. The next day, I reported the incident to the school authorities, who were skeptical but intrigued. They placed the book in a display case in the library, honoring Sarah's memory. Jefferson High was still old and creaky, but from that day on, the whispers for help ceased, and Sarah Mitchell's spirit was finally free.